What's up, everybody? I am Nick Whalen from RotoWire, joined this week by Adam Thompson from Bookies.com. We are breaking down our initial leans for Week 9 of the NFL Circa Million Pick'em Contest. If you're new, what it is we pick 5 games against the spread each week. You keep an aggregate record for the season. There's quarterly prizes. There's even a prize for last place, Adam. If you are the worst picker in the entire contest, there is an option there to kind of pivot mid-season, although I don't think there's any math that suggests that it's any easier to lose than win. But you are actually doing your own entry. I've been doing mine this season as well. So appreciate you joining me and looking forward to breaking down some of these games.
Yeah, Circa has a great contest. You got to get out to Vegas to sign up, but you don't have to be in Vegas to play, as long as you have somebody to input them for you. They do well. They're fair, and it's a fun way to just kind of follow the NFL season too.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's added some weeks. It's added extra stress to my Sundays. Other weeks, it's been elation when you come out on the right side of a game. I was telling John McKechnie, who's been helping me out with the picks this season, in our pod earlier this week. I don't know if I've ever been more distraught watching a football game than watching Nelson Agholor not bring in that onside kick for the Baltimore Ravens last week. We were on Baltimore minus 9.5. We felt great about it. There were like 4 separate times where the Ravens left the back door open, and finally we thought they had put them away. Were you on Baltimore last week as well?
I was.
Oh no!
So I know exactly what you were talking about, and that's a set. The Ravens. And I posted an angry tweet as soon as that happened, basically saying I've talked to kindergarten teachers with more killer instinct than the Baltimore Ravens, because that's not the first time. They've. You look at them and you're like, okay, this team has it. They come firing, They hammer their opponents, and the next thing you know, they're it's a 1-score game. They're favored by 5.5. And here we are again. And that was a prime horrible example for both of us on why you should always like the Ravens but never love the Ravens.
I know, man. I know. And I even thought after the onside kick was recovered that we might get away with it, because Arizona, I thought, kind of mismanaged the clock a little bit. They ran maybe 1 or 2 more plays than you would have liked. They're running time off. You're thinking, all right, it's down to like 24 seconds. They're close enough. Maybe they just gun for the touchdown. Hopefully they don't get it. And then, they roll the kicker out there, and I think we knew what was going to happen. It's never a great sign when you're...
The kicker missed a field goal, right? Did he miss the field goal and then he got a second try and got it?
I think there's a penalty, right? There's like an offside or something.
And it was offsides on the offense is what it was.
Right.
So the play didn't count. He shanked the field goal. Then he got another chance 5 yards back and he nailed it.
Yeah, I know. It was that kind of week, man. And, we got a commenter in here live who says, whenever you could put Nelson Agholor on the hands team, you got to do it. Is there a player, a receiver specifically in the NFL who you trust less in that situation than Nelson Agholor?
Well, I went 4-1 last week too. That was my one loss. I should have I should have run the table that week.
Nice.
Yeah, they killed me. So lesson learned, I guess. Probably not. I'll probably back the Ravens again, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. We've learned plenty of lessons this year, and some of those don't necessarily carry over week to week. John and I are coming off a 3-2 week, so we held our own. Would have been nice to get to 4-1. Our one big loss, Adam, came on the LA Rams +6 against Dallas. I had faith that the Rams would keep that close. We still hadn't really seen Dallas, really take it to an opponent in a few weeks. That changed in a big way. That one was basically over by the end of the first quarter. Just a bad pick there. Didn't really expect the Rams to no-show like that. Stafford obviously getting banged up, but even by the time Stafford was out of the game, that one was decided. But what were your big hits, and what was your one miss last week?
Well, let's see. My one miss was our aforementioned Ravens. That was our best week. I haven't gone 5-0 yet. 4-1. That was solid. I actually liked the Cowboys last week.
Really? Okay.
I thought they, Dak Prescott kind of feasts on bad defenses on occasion, and as good as the Rams have played, I'm just not feeling it yet. And they're really good at stopping opposing wide receivers. They're one of the top 3 teams in yards allowed to wideouts. And if you can limit Stafford and his wideouts, you're going to limit the Rams big time. And then obviously when Stafford went down, that made it extremely difficult for them to rally any kind of comeback after that initial blitz by Dallas.
Yeah, I was just totally wrong on that one. Could not have been more wrong. Been kind of underestimating the Cowboys a few times this season. Let's take a look now at the Week 9 slate, Adam. We'll try to each hand out maybe 3 or 4 games that we're potentially leaning toward using. And the Circa lines, if you're new to this, they lock. They just came out about a half hour ago, and those will not change. So we have some quarterback situations, some injuries, of course, that we're monitoring between now and Sunday. But the numbers that we have now are the numbers that we will be using for the week. So keep that in mind. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, did you have any interest in this Cowboys-Eagles game? We got the Eagles as 3-point favorites at home.
They're on my list
Okay.
to back Dallas again. And I'm contradicting myself because Dak Prescott does not show up against good defenses. He does show up against the lesser opponents. But I think this could be a Dak Prescott game. That Eagles defense has really kind of struggled against the pass. Philly has the best record in the NFL, but they don't feel like that team that just goes out and just takes care of business. Speaking of the Ravens, these Eagles, they let teams hang around and they're finding ways to win. Dallas has that one inexplicable defeat at Arizona on their schedule, but 3 of their other 4 wins, or 4 of their other 5 wins, are by 20 or more. So, when they come ready to play. Yep. They kind of flip the switch. McCarthy, stayed in the office this whole week, told his coaches, kiss your family goodbye. And since then, they've looked like a better team, actually. And I talked about, how Dallas, they're really good against wideouts. They actually rank number 2 in fewest yards allowed to wide receivers. So you got Jalen Hurts. He has 2 of the premier wideouts in the league, but so did the Rams. And we saw what they did against them. And if Jalen Hurts isn't moving around as well as he usually does, that's a huge bonus for Dallas because now they don't have to worry about that as much. They can pin their ears back a little bit. Running quarterbacks have kind of been an issue for them. But if Jalen can't move around, I think that plays into Dallas's hands. So +3, I would have liked +3.5, but the line hasn't really moved all week. I thought it might move closer to game time, but we get +3 here, and it's good enough where it's definitely on my short list.
Yeah, it's always like a lottery system almost when you're waiting for that email when the lines come out and just kind of hoping that you get the hook in these situations. I think with it sitting at 3, it's probably a stay away for me. I actually lean Eagles here at home. I think that's big. And, I personally think it's been a little bit overstated. Every time we talk about the Eagles, we say, man, they just don't look like they did last year. They're 7-1. They took a bad loss to the Jets in week 6, but other than that, I mean, they've taken care of business as well as anybody has. The Bills are slipping up, the Niners are slipping up. Every elite team has 1 or 2 of these games throughout the season. We just saw the Chiefs, have their worst game in terms of EPA of the entire Patrick Mahomes era last week. So sure, Philly has not been quite as dominant as last season, but I think when you start to compare them to the other elite teams around the league, they've been about as consistent as can be. The big thing that I'm looking for on the Philly side in this game is, can they finally start to limit the turnovers? They've gotten away with it these last couple of weeks. They had 2 turnovers, 2 bad ones against Washington. I mean, one at the 3-yard line and then the tush-push turnover at the goal line. I mean, they gave up 2 touchdowns and still won that game, still put up 38. Had 2 bad turnovers against Miami as well, including that fluky pick 6. They had 4 turnovers against the New York Jets. I mean, 8 turnovers in the last 3 games. I think they've been winning despite that. If they can find a way to finally clean those up, I think that's one of the pathways to them starting to look more like last season's Eagles.
Yeah, and this has been one of the more unpredictable seasons ever. Every team is laying an egg, except these Eagles. They did lose to the Jets. They lost to Zach Wilson, but even that game, they're 7-1. There's something to be said for that when you can't find it. Road favorites, home favorites, road dogs. There's nothing to back. There's no real trend that you can follow in these spreads. And the Eagles have been one of the few reliable teams out there.
All right, so one game that I like this week, Adam, and I'll be interested to get your take, whether you're with me or you maybe talk me out of it. I'm a little scared of how much I like the Cincinnati Bengals at home against the Buffalo Bills. And, we're getting a pretty friendly number here. You'll see it at 2 at some books. We got it at 1.5 in Circa. Now, maybe it's a little concerning that number is moving toward Buffalo, but Bills have lost 4 in a row ATS. Josh Allen is 11-10 ATS in his career in night games. So, not the most encouraging trend. He continues to turn the ball over like Jalen Hurts. He's still banged up, was limited at practice throughout the week, dealing with that shoulder elbow issue. And the Bills played on Thursday night last week, but Josh Allen, 6-11-1 ATS in his career on extended rest. So the trends would suggest that maybe that's not as big of an advantage as you might think for Buffalo. Joe Burrow has been fantastic at night. The straight up record is great. The ATS record a little closer to 500, but he is 19-3-1, Adam, against the spread in his last 22 games against non-divisional opponents. So I am fully buying back in, as you can tell, on the Cincinnati Bengals and the resurgence that we saw last week against the Niners.
I like Cincy. They're not one of my 5, but they're right there. And if I'm taking a side, it's on the Bengals. I watched a lot of that Bengals-Niners game last week, just wondering, the Bengals had been trending upwards. Obviously, Burrow had to deal with his injury. He had to get back into season form. We thought he might be, and this Bengals, Niners game was the ultimate test, and they looked unbelievable. Put 31 points on them. They forced turnover. They forced San Francisco and Brock Purdy to look silly, and nobody had made them really look silly like they did. So if they can do that to them, they can do that at home in prime time against Buffalo, who is not consistent. We saw what they did to Miami, but then we saw what they didn't do, I guess you could say, to the Patriots. Mac Jones went 25 of 30 against this defense. So if he can do that, what's Joe Burrow going to do now that he's feeling good, feeling confident in prime time?
Yeah, it's almost become a cliche talking point, but I don't think we can overstate, losing Trey White, losing Matt Milano. I mean, those are two all-pro level players. And, I think the common retort is, well, yeah, everybody's got injuries, but it's like, I mean, those are the two biggest keys for that Buffalo defense. And, Von Miller's back. He's playing limited snaps. He doesn't have a single sack, through 4 games. I think he only has 1 tackle. Like, Von Miller does not look like Von Miller either. And I think that's something that's hindering the Bills defense. All right, what's another game that you have on your list to target?
I'm speaking of Mac Jones. I'm kind of liking the Patriots at -3.
Ooh.
It's stuck at -3. This Commanders defense, they've allowed the 2nd most points in the league. They've allowed the 4th most yards in the league. And now they just traded away their top 2 players on defense. Their top 2 pass rushers, their top run stopper. This is probably pound for pound the worst defense in football now, if they weren't already before. And Mac Jones is playing with confidence now. Like I said, we saw what we did. He didn't look spectacular against the Giants. He doesn't look spectacular against anybody except Buffalo. But they're playing with confidence. That O-line is healing up. They're getting, they're young. They're getting better. They're getting stronger. He should have time. And when he has time, he can throw for 280 plus yards, which he's done a couple times this year. So I think they have enough weapons on offense. They're going to score points. I think Washington's going to score points too. I do like Sam Howell. This would be a good over if you're playing something other than Circa. But I think New England could take your business at home. Washington kind of, I don't know if the players and the coaches didn't wave the white flag, but ownership and management did. They're calling it a season. Ron Rivera's on his way out, more likely than not. We saw the players melt down after their last loss. This is just not a team in a good place mentally or physically now. They trade away their top 2 players. So I think New England -3. I think they can get that done. And, one other thing about that game, they lost their 2 top wide receivers. New England did. But you go to Pro Football Focus, you look at the top 50 ranked receivers in the league. Neither one of those guys were in that list. And Demario Douglas, who is still around, is on that list. So they kept their 1 top receiver, maybe not statistically, but in terms of actual functionality. And maybe now some other young guys get an opportunity and actually might make the offense even better.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points there. What worries me is something you mentioned with Sam Howell in this offense. Like, they shed some pieces on defense, and I think it's really difficult to assess, what that does to a team psychologically, right? For a team that already kind of felt like it was reeling to then just, midseason say goodbye to 2 of your best players on defense. It certainly makes them a worse team, and I think it sends a message to the rest of that locker room that, whatever we do the rest of the season, maybe it doesn't matter, and it's tough to quantify, what that means in the immediate future for a game like this. I worry about Washington scoring too many points here because Mac Jones is 1-15 straight up in his career when the opponent scores more than 24 points. So if this is a game that's played in the upper 20s, and I'm with you, I like the over on 40.5 for the total. If Washington's putting up 27, 30 points here, that's where I worry that New England can't quite keep up. So I think New England has to win this game defensively, and I think they certainly can do that. I don't think Washington's going to be able to run the ball overly effectively. But the fact that they still have that offense intact, that's what's keeping me from really feeling confident in this one way or the other. But I think if I had to take a side at 3, it would be New England. And you'll see this at 3.5 at some other books. So if you like New England, you're actually getting a decent price, even though it's right on the key number.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try to pitch you on a couple here, Adam. Can I talk you into the Indianapolis Colts as 2.5-point favorites on the road at Carolina? What I worry about here is Indianapolis is letting everybody score right now. I mean, it's a free ticket to 35 plus points. The question is, can Carolina actually take advantage of that? A team that has not really put up points against anybody. I think they have like 2 games this year where they've been above 20. Obviously we know some of the ATS numbers, some of the straight up numbers with Minshew. They're not good. He's 4-10 ATS in these toss up games when there's a spread of 4 points or less. He's 2-13 straight up in his last 15, but to me, it feels like he's playing better. Like this Colts team, they got juice right now. Like I still am trying to struggle to figure out if they're actually, a reasonable team or if they're just kind of a frisky bad team. Probably more so the latter at this point. But Carolina's been terrible on the road. They have not covered on the road yet this season. Obviously, they're riding high after getting their first win last week. But I thought that was a game where Houston just really didn't play all that well. That was pretty easily the worst game of the year for that offense and for CJ Stroud. So I'm kind of selling high, I guess, on Carolina here. And I like that this one stayed under 3 for the Colts.
Yeah, I had Carolina last week in
Nice.
Circa against Houston. Just felt like the matchups were there, and CJ Stroud was he's getting off his 2 worst games of the season. I think defenses are just kind of figuring out that, and coaching staffs are just kind of figuring out that rookie quarterback. But you're right, Carolina didn't do anything that would make you think, okay, they've really turned the corner. Here we go. Here goes Frank Reich. I'm not feeling it. Now there is a Frank Reich, connection here. He's going to want to go in there and obviously do something against his old team. But I think the Colts have a better path to being good. Gardner Minshew, first off, needs to stop turning the ball over. He is a machine of turnovers. But you look at the run game that they have 2 very good running backs. They can rush for 200 yards against some teams, and they should. And how does Carolina counter that? Give the ball to Adam Thielen 15 times? I don't think that's sustainable over the course of a game. And there's really not any other weapons that you have to worry about. I think this is a good matchup for the Colts. The Colts can't really stop anybody against the pass, but the Carolina can't really pass. So I think that really helps. Carolina, I don't know how they're going to score exactly. I think Indianapolis has a better path to being successful in this game and beyond. And it starts with Gardner Minshew not handing teams the ball.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't know if we could count on him to do that. And that's the one major holdup here. I mean, he had back-to-back 4 turnover games. I mean, it feels like he's bound to throw just a ungodly interception at some point in every game. But you also mentioned the Colts running game, and that's what I'm leaning on more than anything. If we use this in our entry this week, it's going to be because I think this could be a game where Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor combined for close to 200 yards. I mean, Carolina is dead last in the NFL coming into this week in rush defense EPA. They're giving up almost 140 yards per game. That's right near the bottom of the league as well. Yards per attempt, they're in the bottom 5. They've given up 14 rushing touchdowns on the year. Ironically, that's the second most behind only Indianapolis. So we'll see if Chuba Hubbard gets going. But I think this is one where the Colts, for like the 4th week in a row, are going to be involved in a shootout. And if the Colts are pushing 30 points here, I don't know if I trust Carolina to keep up. And even with the turnovers with Gardner Minshew, it seems like this team just generates chance after chance after chance. They have a ton of possessions, a ton of drives each game, and I think against an inferior opponent like Carolina, this is a pretty good spot to get the Colts at 2.5. What's another game you're looking at, Adam?
Well, I was going to mention, we just saw the Colts lose to Cleveland 39-38. I mean, exactly. Cleveland has one of the premier defenses, in decades, statistically in football, and they scored 38 on them. So certainly they can bounce back. Speaking of teams that you can't really bank on, but I'm going to bank on this week, I think, is the New York Jets. Ooh. Plus 3.5. I like that number. They're taking on a Chargers team that everybody likes for good, Justin Herbert, they have weapons, but, so far the Chargers, they beat the Bears, and everybody kind of said they're back. This is the Chargers team, but they beat the Bears. I'm not overly impressed by that. LA's, offense, it's just been wildly erratic. This Jets defense has done a really good job. They shut down Mahomes and Josh Allen in prime time. They held it, they combined I think just 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions against those 2 quarterbacks. So Justin Herbert, kind of a similar style, maybe lesser of the weapons, but I think the Jets can hang. They've won 3 in a row. They're figuring out how to win. Zach Wilson, he plays with a little too much confidence sometimes, and it costs them. And they're coming off this big win, but it was, they were down 10-7 in the final seconds and just pulled one out of their rear end. So I'm not all in on the Jets to turn this thing around, but they've won 3 in a row. You're getting 3.5 points at night at home. They have a good track record in both those instances. So I'm locking it for this contest. I got it in real life at plus 3.5. Okay. I was hoping it would be 3.5 for a contest. If it were at plus 3, would I have pulled the trigger? I'm not 100% sure, but plus 3.5, I think that's worth it.
I think it's a great price. Like you said, you see a lot of 3s this week, and getting it at 3.5 is key here. I mean, if we know one thing about the Chargers, it's that they will allow the Jets to hang around no question. And it's just a matter of will the Jets actually take advantage of that? And, Zach Wilson, I'm with you. I don't trust him whatsoever. I know he's shown flashes every now and then, made a couple nice throws to get them down to where they needed to be to kick a field goal last week, but was also pretty brutal for the first 59 minutes and 30 seconds of that game. But he has one pick in his last 170 pass attempts. That's been big with him. He's still, he's still dropping back. He's running 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage and just whipping the ball out of bounds. It feels like every other drop back, but he's not turning the ball over at the same rate that he was last season or even earlier this year. And that's what's keeping the Jets alive in some of these ugly, close games. And there's going to be a couple fluky turnovers. There's going to be some bad decisions from Brandon Staley that are going to allow the Jets to capitalize. I'm staying away from this one. If anything, I kind of wanted to back the Chargers, but I'm sure as hell not doing that at 3.5. This does seem like a spot where for as badly as the Jets played for most of last week, there is this upswell of positivity around this team. And I think they look forward to a matchup like this. They see a team like the Chargers that is poorly coached and has all this variance week to week. And I think if I'm the Jets defense, I'm licking my chops, knowing that Austin Eckler is not going to be able to run on this team. The Chargers have not really been able to run the ball at all this season, let alone when Austin Eckler has come back these last 4 games. They've been getting him involved as a pass catcher out of the backfield, which is nice. I don't know if we can count on him, having that explosive kind of game against the Jets that he did against Chicago last week. So yeah, if part of your bet here is that the Chargers are a little overvalued after beating a terrible Bears team, I could buy in on that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the Jets defense has done really well against better competition. They played the Bills, they played the Chiefs, they played the Eagles. They've held all those teams to 23 points or less. So, if they can do that here, they can lose 23-20. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I look at this one similarly to New England and Washington in some ways, where if the Chargers are scoring 27 to 30 points, they're winning this game. I don't think the Jets are winning 33 to 30. The Jets need to hold the Chargers probably under 24 points, I think, to have a chance to win straight up. But hey, that's where the 3.5 comes in. All right, I'm going to ask you a very, very difficult question, Adam. Do we dare trust the Atlanta Falcons against Jaren Hall and the Minnesota Vikings? They are 4.5-point favorites at home.
That's a lot of points. But I like the Falcons. I think Desmond Ridder. Well, whenever I say I like Desmond Ridder, he proves me that I was an idiot the very next week, and usually does something dumb that costs me a pick, a win.
Yeah, but I still don't have to deal with that anymore.
Fortunately, I like what the Falcons are doing. I think defensive. Now they lost Grady Jarrett. They lost their top defensive lineman. That's a big key, but. You look at this Vikings team, and it was all Kirk Cousins. What now? You have Alexander Madison, who has flashes. He did well against the Packers. But
I don't know if that's saying much these days.
Right. And Jefferson's not back yet, and who's he gonna? Addison's great, but there's just not a lot there for Minnesota. So. I would lean Falcons. I didn't touch this one on either side because Atlanta has burned me at times, and I do like what Atlanta's doing, but I stayed away from this one. But if I was leaning on the side, it would probably be against Hall and those Vikings.
I think it has to be, right. And what we saw from Will Levis last week, I think has some people spooked. It's like, all right, everybody was thinking fade Will Levis, first start. It's a guy that they didn't really anticipate throwing in this week or this year. And he goes for 4 touchdowns and completely lights it up and looks like a much more dynamic downfield thrower than Ryan Tannehill. I don't think we're getting that out of Jaren Hall. I don't know what to expect. I mean, we saw such a limited sample at the end of that game last week against Green Bay where they were just asking him to, hey, protect the lead here. We're not going to ask you to do anything but protect the lead. And he did lose a sack fumble on his 3rd snap. But I don't really know a whole lot about Jaren Hall. He was a mobile quarterback, a guy they used in a lot of ways at BYU, but there's really no way to predict how this goes. There are some trends here that do push me in favor of Atlanta. Minnesota 2-6 ATS as a dog under Kevin O'Connell. They also have 1 rushing touchdown on the season, and that came last week against Green Bay. I mean, that is a jarring stat. We are now 8 weeks into the year, and Atlanta is very quietly one of the best rush defenses in the NFL. Now, losing Grady Jarrett, maybe that changes that a little bit, but they're second in rushing EPA on defense. Minnesota can't really run the ball anyway, which worries me because I think in a situation where you're starting Jaren Hall, you want to be able to lean on that running game. And if you can't do that, that means you're putting the ball in his hands and asking him to throw it. And I don't think they want him to be tossing the ball around 25, 30 times in this game. Falcons are also number 2 in the NFL, Adam, in pressure rate coming into this game. So Minnesota, not a great offensive line in general. They just traded away one of their starting guards to the Jaguars earlier this week, and Ezra Cleveland. Atlanta has not been great against the pass, but I don't think that matters this week against Jared Hall. So it's a tricky number at 4.5. I understand if you're staying away, but I think we do agree. If you're playing this one, play Atlanta. That's going to be the side with Taylor Heineke at quarterback. All right, one or two more from you, Adam. What are some other games that are going to make your card?
The one I kind of like, speaking of rookie quarterbacks, I should say, speaking of fading rookie quarterbacks, is the Browns. Minus 7.5. I think we got them right against the Cardinals. Clayton Tune making his NFL debut with the Cardinals. Not a good spot against the Cleveland defense that's, has one of the premier defenses, obviously, in the league. And, Tune, he's kind of a mostly unknown. So I went to NFL.com and I looked up his draft profile to see what exactly the experts of the experts said for Clayton Tune. And it said things such as pressure rattles his reads and accuracy plummets when he's forced to move his feet. So here come the Browns in Cleveland. So minus 7.5. I like that number. I think if Arizona gets to 13 points, that would be a win for them. This is a gap week, presumably until Kyler Murray shows up next week. I'm hoping he doesn't make a surprise this week, because I'm taking Cleveland minus 7.5. I think Arizona, I think they're looking at this week like, let's just get out of Cleveland healthy. Let's get this team to Kyler Murray. Let's build some excitement for the following week. Let's not throw him out there against, Myles Garrett and those guys. So I think they're actually going to punt this week. Basically, just throw Clayton to the dogs. Lose 27-10, something of that nature. As long as PJ Walker doesn't hand Arizona 7 to 14 points, I think Cleveland rolls here.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I have that one on my list as well. I think we'll almost certainly be including that on our card. And it comes down to the Clayton Tune factor. If Josh Dobbs was still on this team and starting this game and the number was 7.5, I don't think I would take it. Like, I actually really like what I've seen on balance from Josh Dobbs this season. And, he's faded a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but I don't think Clayton Tune could keep this team in games. He's not going to have the mobility that someone like Josh Dobbs does. And I think you're totally right. I think Arizona is kind of in punt mode for this week, and we'll see what happens, if it's Kyler Murray going forward, which that's a whole different discussion as to why they're bringing him back. PJ Walker, by the way, like that there is some concern there. I mean, we saw the terrible decision throwing the pick late that sunk them last week against Seattle. He is 7-2 ATS in his career. And by the way, they're not fully locked in on PJ Walker. There is still some hope, I suppose, that Deshaun Watson could play. They haven't closed the door on that. I'm expecting it to be PJ Walker, and I think at this point, Adam, I would rather it be PJ Walker if I'm back in the Browns.
Right. Yeah, it's like that Spider-Man meme where they're both pointing at each other. Who cares? They're the same guy at this point, until Deshaun Watson shows us that he's worth $200 million, or even $1.25. Either way, I like Cleveland.
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski also 7-0 straight up in his career as a favorite of at least a touchdown. So if you're thinking about using the Browns in Survivor, that's something that should make you feel a little more comfortable. All right, but before we head out, Adam, we had a question in the chat. What do you think of pounding the Raiders overs with folks way down on them? Our friend Chad here said he's really zeroing in on Jacobs receiving props because Aiden O'Connell buried him in targets last time, and the Giants have a bad defensive line. The Giants defense has actually played better over the last couple of weeks. I'm a little concerned about that. I mean, this game to me is just screaming stay away. Like, I don't know. I don't really know how to judge what's happening with the Raiders, right? Like, it's like on one side we have a team that threw for -9 passing yards last week. On the other side, we have a team that fired its coach, GM, offensive coordinator, and quarterback midway through the week. We've seen this go both ways, though, right? Like, sometimes it can be galvanizing. Like, if that locker room was out on Josh McDaniels, which I assume at least some players were, maybe this is something where they rally around, an interim coach in Antonio Pierce. But it could also go the other way where, Vegas and Devontae Adams and those guys are just kind of resigned to the fact that this is going to be a lost season. I don't have a great read on this one. The game is in Vegas. Raiders are 2-point favorites. Like I said, we'll not be including this on the card, but it's kind of a fascinating game to break down. Yeah,
I think Devontae Adams is one of those people who is not high on McDaniels leaving town. But, and he was, what did he get? One pass in the last game with Garoppolo to him. So that's, I could see the new coach telling the new quarterback, see Devontae over there? Throw it to him 15 times and see what happens.
See what happens.
Maybe he'll catch 8 of them for 120 yards. You'll look great. Everybody will look great. And the Raiders will hang on. But yeah, I'm not touching this game either way. I like what the Giants play spirited. I don't blame the coaching as much for what's happening there. Now Daniel Jones is back.
Yes.
allegedly. What does that mean exactly? I don't know. At this point, I think it means they should have a little more, balance on offense. I guess, hopefully Jones can use his legs a little more. But yeah, too many unknowns in this game from both sides to really attack.
Yeah, and we should note too, Saquon Barkley's banged up. He popped up on the injury report yesterday. Yeah. We're waiting on an update on him today, but no Darren Waller. Looking like they won't have Andrew Thomas or Evan Neal as well, so that could clear the way for Max Crosby. Just don't bet it. If you're in Circa, don't include this one. We don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I think back to last season, Adam, where the Raiders were on the other side of a game like this, where the Colts were that team that was in complete disarray. They made one of the craziest hirings of all time in Jeff Saturday. And I remember, I wasn't in this contest last year, but I had money on the Raiders. I was like, there's no way the Colts could win this game. This is going to be a total disaster. And what happens? The Colts somehow show up and win, right? Like there's just there are too many variables here for me. Way too many variables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like you like Dolphins or Chiefs?
Number is 1.5 at Circa. Yeah. I'm on the Chiefs here. My fear is that we've seen the Dolphins come up short in this scenario twice, right? They had their two big matchups against the Bills and the Eagles. Both of those were true road games, whereas this is neutral site in Germany. They came up flat in both of those. They really weren't all that close. The offense didn't look the same. They got rattled early and weren't really able to battle back. So I'm inclined to think that when they're facing another opponent with a really good defense in the Chiefs and an offense that's not going to play as bad as it did last week. I mean, like I said earlier, it was literally the worst game of the Mahomes era in terms of EPA per drive. Like they're not turning it over 5 times again. They're not going to be that bad. I think it's a good bounce back spot for the Chiefs, but you could also make the argument that, okay, maybe this is the time that Miami finally gets over the hump against a good opponent.
Yeah, this is their last real shot because they have not looked good against those other two. Miami hasn't. Here's an interesting tidbit. Miami hasn't beaten a team straight up with a winning record since week 3 of last year. So they've just been feasting on the lesser teams of the NFL. They are not beating good teams. But I do like how Miami left for Germany on Tuesday to get acclimated, to actually experience the culture, get away from things. Kansas City's leaving today. They're showing up. They're unpacking their bags. They're in the field. So what's going to be better? I guess you could go either way. But Chiefs players have been grumbling. They don't want to go. This sucks, is what MVS came out and said. They don't, I'd rather play at Arrowhead. This is our home game. What are we doing? Mm-hmm. So they're coming on. They're kind of salty going into Germany. So maybe, I kind of lean Dolphins because they have to do something here or else everybody's going to label them a fraud, including themselves probably at some point. It has KC been figured out? Did Denver kind of crack the code as far as, Kelsey is their one weapon. These receivers just have not progressed. They just don't have it. It's the same Broncos defense that Miami scored 70 on earlier this year. Maybe, if anything, there's just a bolt of confidence that Miami needs to get over the hump. So plus 1.5. Yeah, it's a tough one. This is not a shoe-in either way for me.
No, me neither.
It's going to be a great game.
It's going to be an awesome game. I'm looking forward to getting up early and watching it at 8:30 a.m. Central here in Wisconsin. But yeah, it's not going to be on the card for me. I think you're right. If you're looking at it from like a motivational perspective, I think Miami has the edge. A lot of the trends would favor the Chiefs. Favorites in these international games are 31-10-1 straight up, which is pretty stark. After a loss in his career, Patrick Mahomes is 15-3 straight up. He's 11-1 straight up when playing on the road or at a neutral site following a loss. 9-3 ATS when the Chiefs score 20 or fewer points the previous week. I think there's a lot of things that would push us towards the Chiefs bouncing back. But like you mentioned, I think their problems on offense are more real this season than they have been in years past, because we go through this cycle every season with the Chiefs where they have a couple of down weeks and we start to say, maybe they're not the kings of the AFC anymore. And then, of course, 6 weeks later, they're 13-2 and we're looking foolish. But I think this year they're going to have a little bit more trouble breaking out of that. Shio Kapadia from The Ringer had a good stat that I mentioned on the pod yesterday. 5 of the 20 worst games in terms of EPA on offense of the Mahomes era have come this season for the Chiefs. It's one thing to look at last week against Denver and say, okay, maybe that was an aberration, but they've had a couple games that have been close, in terms of how much they've struggled offensively. And, in years past, they've kind of found somebody to unlock as the season goes along. And I don't know who that guy is. I was pretty shocked that they didn't make even a move on the margins to add somebody at the deadline. I don't think McCole Hardman is really moving the needle for them.
Yeah, I thought Kadarius Toney, I picked him up in every fantasy league I could find. I thought, all right, if you're the number one receiver for the Mahomes, you're going to put up some stats. And then the first week, he single-handedly cost him a game against the Lions, and it really hasn't gotten a lot better since then. So, yeah, maybe this is just one of those years where, nobody has emerged. There's when you have 4 number 2 receivers, you have no number 1 receiver. They just don't have that go-to guy yet.
Mm-hmm. All right, before we head out, we want to thank our sponsor, Circa Resort and Casino. They, of course, put on the Circa Million contest. They do Circa Survivor as well. Highly recommend if you're in Vegas anytime over the next year, make sure you get in for 2024. These contests are so much fun, spice everything up each week. And Circa Resort, as you know, Adam, has the best pool in history. That's what it says right here. Stadium swim. We're talking 3 levels, 6 pools, a 143-foot screen. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros. You can catch all the action poolside. They got a variety of seating options, day beds, temperature-controlled cabanas. You can sit in the hot tub. You can sit in the pool, watch whatever you want. Stadium Swim. It's located at Circa Resort and Casino, and it's open 365 days a year. That is not normal. Most Vegas pools, this time of year, they're shut down for a few months. Not Circa. They're open year-round, all sports, all season. You can book today at circalasvegas.com. That's circalasvegas.com. Adam, appreciate you taking the time to join me, man. It's good to bounce some picks off of you. I think you maybe talked me out of a couple. You maybe talked me into a few as well. Best of luck this week, and looking forward to recapping things in Week 10.
You too, man. Good luck.